Hello and welcome to my easy to understand guide to Straight Out of Compton, which could appear on Component 1, Section B of the Industries section only, A-Level Media Studies on the Eduqas exam board, and only up until 2020. After 2020, instead of Straight Out of Compton, it will be Black Panther. So please be aware of that. So this video is only useful for you if you are taking the exam in 2020. It's important for an industries question to be prepared for stepped questions. That means several parts, maybe with different marks available, maybe a 1 mark, a 2 mark question, an 8 mark and a 12 mark. So you need to be prepared to answer lots of different things and know lots of facts about Straight Out of Compton. I'm going to try and go through as much as possible. On the screen at the moment, you've got a list of the kind of things you might need to know for Straight Out of Compton, and I'm going to try and go through as many of these things as possible. Straight Outta Compton was produced by a company called Legendary Pictures. Legendary Pictures is quite a big, well-known production company. If you have a look at some of the products they've made in the past, you can see some of them here on screen at the moment. It does probably give the audience an idea of the quality that they might expect from Straight Outta Compton, because so many of their other films have done very well and been, given several awards. Legendary Pictures did work with Universal, also a big company. Universal were the people that did the distribution for Straight Outta Compton. So they're the ones that did the marketing and distributed it to audiences in cinemas and on DVD, etc. Universal is part of a massive conglomerate, as is Legendary, although it's two separate conglomerates. Legendary is part of a Chinese conglomerate. Universal is part of Comcast, which is a massive global conglomerate as well. So having two very large, vertically, horizontally integrated companies that are part of giant global conglomerates can have a really positive effect on your film. It means that you're going to have more money. It means you're going to be able to attract bigger stars. It means that you're going to be able to have more marketing materials and more resources, more funding, more staff working on your film. And it means that you are going to be more easily able to distribute your film globally, which is what happened with Straight Outta Compton. For example, they were able to get the rights to the NWA music, to work with real members of the band, both in the film intro and the outro to the film, and also work with the real members of the band in some of the trailers as well. They were able to cast some real stars in the film, people who might have been famous in other things that the audience would recognise. They had huge set pieces, so for example, there are scenes within the film set in kind of villas and mansions, really quite expensive looking properties with swimming pools and hundreds of extras. There were scenes set in what looks to be quite large music gigs with thousands of people in the audience, lighting, special effects, etc. So having these large conglomerate companies involved had a really positive impact in terms of the amount of money. They were also able to spend loads of that money on marketing. Universal did the marketing for the film, and there was a huge range of marketing techniques they used. They did traditional marketing like trailers and posters. They made two different trailers, a green band and a red band. If you don't know what the difference is, a green band is a slightly more family-friendly trailer that you can distribute to more countries because it's more acceptable in more countries. That does not include very many, I don't think any swearing, and very few scenes of violence. And there is also a red band trailer, which is much more adult. There's swearing, there's profanity, there's use of racial language, there's quite a lot of violence in there, there's nudity as well. That red band trailer is aimed at adult audiences, the slightly younger audiences who want something more shocking and controversial, and you can use that trailer to target those audiences in particular. So they were able to have these different trailers to target different audiences. They even had a trailer that had an introduction by the real Dr. Dre and Ice Cube in black and white, looking very culturally kind of educational, talking about their background and their life, and the history of Compton. And that trailer was specifically designed to engage audiences who liked historical biopics. The ability to make multiple trailers and posters is something that they had because they were part of the Universal marketing team. Universal also created a meme generator for Straight Outta Compton. This was something that audiences could download, and they could put in their own city or town name and make their own kind of memes that they could put on their social media pages. And this meme generator was used, I think, something ridiculous like 1 million times in the first 24 hours that it was available, which just goes to show how how viral marketing can go when it's used online. But Universal had the money to do something like that, and that would have been quite a hard thing to do to have a meme generator made and produced that was capable of handling so much content on a global scale. So having a company like Universal involved means that you can do these kind of interesting marketing techniques. In the same way, they were able to secure Dre and Ice Cube as executive producers on the film, and their names were used all over the film posters and trailers, and this would have made it clear to the audience that perhaps this film might be more realistic, it might be more exciting, might be more honest and truthful portrayal of NWA, and it would have drawn in those pre-sold audiences of the band as well. Of course, you should have a think about what the impact of having Dre and Ice Cube on board as executive producers might be, as well as drawing in an audience and perhaps helping you to market the film. There might also be an expectation that the film might be more real and honest or truthful portrayal of NWA if you've got the real band members involved in making it. However, it could be also that they are going to perhaps not want to represent themselves in a bad light. So the fact that they are on board means that you could argue that perhaps the film might be a slightly more sort of sanitized or clean version of their histories than perhaps it might be if they weren't helping to produce the film. So there are examples of things that were left out of the film. Several of the band members have criminal records, and there was quite a lot of domestic violence, for example, from Dre towards his then girlfriend. Perhaps having the band members on board, it might give the audience an illusion that the film is going to be more realistic, but actually it might mean that the film has portrayed the band in a more kind of rose-tinted, positive way than perhaps it really was. There are a few different audiences for Straight Outta Compton, and it's important that you understand these different audiences. I've put them on the screen just here so you can see them, and how the marketing materials in particular have been designed to appeal to these audiences. So being able to look, for example, at the trailer, or at least one of the trailers, being able to look maybe at the website for the film, or their social media pages, their posters, the meme generator, and understand how all of these things might have been designed to appeal to these particular audiences is important. So, for example, NWA fans would have been engaged by the constant references to NWA all over the marketing materials. Their name is mentioned several times. In fact, the poster itself has been designed to look like one of the old NWA albums, so this intertextual reference that might have been obvious to fans of the real NWA. And so some of these marketing materials are designed directly to target those audiences and draw them in. Use of NWA music, and indeed rap music in general, are going to engage fans of rap and the NWA tracks. That is heavily played both in the trailers, and it was also on the Straight Outta Compton website as background tracks as well. Fans of biopic or historical films based on reality might have been engaged by the constant references to the fact that this film was the truth behind the band, or the real story of NWA. That black and white beginning to one of the trailers where the real Dre and the real Ice Cube talk to the audience about how culturally significant their band was, and what it was like for them growing up in Compton and how they became famous before the trailer starts, would have been a really good way of appealing to those fans who wanted to feel like they were seeing something historical and factual. Fans of the film studios like Universal or Legendary might have been engaged by seeing their logo, which popped up on the trailer and on the posters as well, though it was quite small, but it might have attracted those fans of their previous work. You could talk about young urban males being engaged by the fact that the vast majority of the cast are young, male, black. You could talk about the fact that there are several scenes within the trailer of police violence, institutionalized racism, and particular references to things like the Rodney King incident, which might be quite useful for you to know in terms of context for this topic. But these references within the trailer specifically might have been really good at engaging young black male audiences who might have been able to relate to the issues in the film, or who might have had family members who might have gone through similar instances of racism or institutionalized racism in their past as well. The use of technology like the meme generator and the use of social media would have appealed to young audiences, people who use digital media all the time. So it's important to be able to look at all these marketing materials and work out why they've been used and who they appeal to. It's important for the industries section of the exam to understand a little bit about regulation of the film industry. The BBFC is the British Board of Film Classification, and in the UK, they are the ones responsible for regulating the film industry. They give certificates to films, they ensure that films follow the rules, and they have the ability they have the ability, I can't say it, they have the ability to demand that a film or a film production company makes cuts to a film if they want to get a particular certificate at the cinema. They awarded Straight Outta Compton a 15 certificate, and some people said this might be a bit low, considering that there was some graphic scenes of a sexual nature, there was drug taking, there was violence, and there was quite a lot of swearing and racial language used in the film as well. But actually, there is a director's cut version of the film, which is even more graphic, which has an 18 certificate, and that film is available on DVD and also on Netflix occasionally as well. It's important to be aware of the certificates and why they might have been awarded. Some people argue that films like Straight Outta Compton have an educational purpose and that perhaps the certificates might not be as important, or that regulations should be perhaps relaxed slightly for films like this. There have been other films that have been similar, so things like This Is England, it was graphic, it was violence, it did have a lot of racism in it, but actually it could have had quite a beneficial message to give to young people in particular about racism. And so some people argue that films like This Is England or Straight Outta Compton could have younger or lower certificates to enable more people to be able to watch them. And that's one of the problems that BBFC and other regulatory boards struggle with, is they have to tread this fine line between protecting the audience and maybe giving them choice or benefiting the audience in some way. And ultimately the BBFC decided that people aged 15 and over could see this film at the cinema. Ultimately, age ratings are really important for production and distribution companies, because if your film gets too high a certificate, you are narrowing your audience down to a much more adult audience. So many companies will do whatever they can to cut certain scenes out or tone down swearing, tone down graphic scenes in order to get a slightly lower certificate to widen out their audience. Regulating a film that is going to be distributed globally is quite difficult because every country has their own rules and regulations. Britain has quite strict regulations in comparison to some countries, but in some countries you just would not be able to get away with maybe the racial language or the swearing or the sex scenes or the nudity. It just would not be acceptable. And so companies have to try and work out, are they going to cut those scenes out in order to distribute in those countries? Or are they going to leave the scenes in knowing that they will not be able to distribute in certain countries? So it's worth bearing that in mind. Straight Outta Compton did distribute in several other countries globally, but they were not able to distribute all over the world because of some of the more controversial content. Technology has made the regulation of the film industry really quite difficult. Previously, if you wanted to see a film, you saw it only at the cinema, or you had to buy it on VHS, showing my age, or DVD, and the vast majority of shops will ID young people if they look too young to buy that particular film. But technology, so things like piracy, streaming, Netflix, and any other on-demand services, mean that you can pretty much now access any film you want whenever you want with virtually no age checks at all. And so technology has really endangered the regulation of the film industry, and that's something that Livingstone and Lunt say as well. With Universal being on board as one of the distributors, it was able to take advantage of the fact that they were also distributing several other major products at the same time. So, for example, Universal were also the distributors on the 7th instalment of the Fast and the Furious franchise. It was called Furious 7, I believe. And they made the decision to put the first trailer for Straight Outta Compton before Furious 7 in the cinemas. They thought that was because it had the same target audience, young urban men interested in sort of technology and money and success. And so Universal were able to kind of cross-promote their products against each other. They were they were showing Fast and the Furious in the cinemas, but promoting Straight Outta Compton. It's cheaper for them because they're already involved in the distribution of the Fast and the Furious. So it means it's cheaper marketing for Straight Outta Compton, but you're able to target the same demographic and you're taking advantage of that big horizontally, vertically integrated company that you are. This might have also enabled Straight Outta Compton to become a more mainstream film. You know, it opened it up to a much wider audience, perhaps, than it might have had previously. There was a risk with Straight Outta Compton being about a band that had really been quite famous in the 80s and quite a controversial alternative band as well at the time, that the film could have been seen as quite niche, especially with the kind of amount of graphic sort of nudity, swearing, violence, etc., that might have shut it off from a wider audience. But, you know, marketing it against something like The Fast and the Furious, which is much more mainstream, meant that perhaps it opened Straight Outta Compton up to a wider audience and helped make them more money in the long run. If you're having a think about how mainstream Straight Outta Compton is, just look at how much money it made. It made a huge amount at the box office, with something like $200 million, and it only had a budget of $50 million, and that included all the marketing. So making such a huge amount of money kind of might suggest that it is a more mainstream film than anything else. And certainly, you know, it was distributed reasonably globally. It won an Oscar for the best screenplay, and it also won several other awards as well. So you know, altogether, it does have quite a lot of those typical signifiers of mainstream production. The film's release might also reflect the economic context of the success of other similar films. So things like 8 Mile, Notorious, Get Rich, Dry Trying. These were films that had been released, you know, probably in the kind of 10-year period prior to Straight Outta Compton. And what this meant was they'd done really quite well at the box office, perhaps more so than expected. And this perhaps gave producers of Straight Outta Compton, like Legendary and Universal, it gave them a sense of confidence that their film would also do well, and it made the film seem less risky to them as investors. If you liked this video, please check out my other video for I, Daniel Blake, which is coming soon. And if you are taking this exam after 2020, I will be uploading a Black Panther video for this topic as well shortly.